Chinatown was done in the atmosphere of joy. Bob Evans was terrific. You know, he would let me do whatever I wanted. There were no restrictions. I didn't have to waste energy on discussions with the executives and explanations, justifications. It was just, getting in a car in the morning, going on location or driving to the studio. I remember one of the first moments, I think it was the first day of shooting, Bob had a terrible back. He was literally unable to move. And for some reason, I had back pain as well.
They drove out to the location in the back of a station wagon, both lying on our back. It's a hell of a way to start.
Chinatown happens all over Los Angeles, so you could not shoot the entire film in the studio like they used to do it in the 30s. But I must say that Bob Towne was very helpful, because writing the script, he had already done his homework and knew all places that he was describing. So he indicated us where he had imagined various scenes. And Dick Silbert, although a New Yorker, he knew Hollywood and Los Angeles very well. So we found those places quite quickly. But every interior is built in a studio. I think that he was one of the best production designers that Hollywood ever had.
I would say Chinatown was one of the biggest learning experiences that I had early on in my, well, not so early, but at the beginning of the successful portion of my job. And theater taught me a lot about style and clothes and all the things that a wardrobe person, and had a very integrated point of view about the picture as a whole.
It's a film about a certain period, and what has to be precise, exact, is the sets, the atmosphere, the way the people dress naturally. And I remembered those days. I was a little child, and I remembered my mother doing certain things, like plucking her eyebrows and then drawing very thin line, putting her lipstick in a sort of Cupid bow shape, and the powder and the style of the period. I remember those details, and I wanted to recreate this style, but I did not want any stylization. And here, points of view varied with the whole studio, namely with Bob Evans. Bob couldn't understand why I want to shoot on Panavision. He would like the film to be stylized like the Godfather was, as far as the color was concerned, that sort of brownish, reddish tint. I didn't think that it was necessary. As a film, the style that I wanted to give it was Raymond Chandler's style, when he writes his story in first person. Therefore, I wanted to tell this film subjectively. And one thing on which I was insisting during the work with Bob Towne was that they should not be scenes which are without guitars.
One of the techniques that he used, that I also used in the second picture, when I was the director of Two Jakes, was you shoot from behind the detective, so that the story is coming at the audience really a lot more than normally through his point of view.
Stanley Cortez was the first DP. He was very much the old-fashioned, old-style DP, and his lighting gave this sort of 40s, 30s look to the film, this Technicolor look. I was not particularly upset with it, but Bob Evans was very much. Besides, he took tremendous amount of time to light a scene. So Bob asked me to look for another director of photography quick because it had to be done within a day or two. So I looked at the films of people who were available at that time, and I thought that John Alonso was someone that we should try. I must say that Dick Silbert would help me very much in all these decisions. As far as framing is concerned, it's me. One thing that I really am very particular about is the framing. I leave a completely free hand to the director of photography as far as lighting is concerned. I listen with interest to his proposals, ideas, etc. But the framing, it's my movie. I have it in my mind more or less before, and it becomes concrete after the rehearsal on the set, and that's the way I want to see it.
As the story tells it, he was a regular police officer and apparently was dismissed or had to resign from duty because of getting too personally involved with the case in Chinatown. That gives the backstory its kind of resonance, and the idea that in Chinatown you think you know what's going on, but you don't. Mystery. You know, that's what that character had and what Chinatown was sort of meant to represent as a metaphor.
I just love the name Gittes for a pushy private detective. And it's a name that just, it's fun to say, Gittes. And then Huston genuinely mispronounced it, and that was kept. It was just a name that suggested a kind of pushy, kind of bedroom peeper, a hustler. And I love the name.
The humor in it is Jack. The lines are written by Bob Towne, and sometimes they're very funny, but the way they're read, it's Jack. I didn't have much rehearsal. You know, we rehearsed on the set a few minutes before the shoot.
Roman taught me a lot of things about acting in a movie. I remember him having a discussion with him about how you have to act with a car. You don't just drive it. You know, you have to think about what's really going on and drive the car graphically accordingly. Then I had a lot of problems early on with everyone felt I talked strangely, but particularly slowly. And I always felt the subliminal attack in terms of, can't we kind of speed it up, Jack? And Roman was the first person who gave me a very undeniable reason for speaking faster than I might normally in this particular picture because of the amount of dialogue and the amount of plot that had to be expressed in the dialogue, and that if I talked and took my normal rhythms, the movie would be 7 hours long or something. So I didn't have any problems adjusting to that particular direction.
We definitely spoke about Roman playing the part of the guy who slits his nose. It just seemed perfect, you know. I just thought it was the perfect thing to do to a nosy guy, to slit his nostril. And it seemed awful to me at the time, and I guess it did to everybody else too. It's suggestive of something horrible.
He wanted to relax as an actor that night and asked me if I had any tips. And I said, well, you know, people know when you're on edge, Roman, and nervous. Why don't you go out on the set the first time and forget to put on your pants? Which he did. And, you know, anything that works for an actor. It's a good actor.
I was not very keen on doing it. In those days, my long hair meant a lot to me, and I didn't want to cut it. I kept it until the very last moment, and literally before the scene, they cut my hair off. And then they came up, the special effect people with all kind of idea of making him a funny nostrils. I knew it wouldn't work. I know that illusions, the most important thing is that things should happen quick. So I asked for the tip of the knife to be swiveling.
It had a flange on the tip so that, when it went like that, you wouldn't see it give and then snap back. And of course, it would only be hinged one way or it wouldn't work.
I had that with blood, and I just had to spurt it in the right moment. And the combination of two of the gives this shocking effect. But the knife could swivel only in one direction. So I realized it, and I said, Jack, I must hold it the right way, otherwise I cut your nostril for real. So please remind me, because it's more important for you than it's for me. And before each take, it had, Roman, the knife. I would check it.
The slit nose was a lesson in itself, the different stages. He's very scientific about these things. The gluing on of stitches, what was under there at any given time, And, of course, as a method actor, I used it to the best of my abilities.
And Roman had the great good sense and the will to say, let's play this out as it would happen with a guy with a bunch of stitches in his nose. He's going to have a bandage on it, and it's going to be there for half the movie.
I doubt whether you could get away with it today when you have a committee sending you notes, which they call the creative group notes, or whatever. To cover the star of the film with a bandage, how can you do it? Of course, it's an idiocy to think this way. Jack was enthused about this idea, and everybody else, and it worked.
He's very, very meticulous, but free at the same time. I mean, we had some good times, and we had some good arguments. We had some real good arguments, actually.
Faye was able to suggest a sense of someone who was damaged in some way. But her poise seemed powerful. And the traditional role of the female in detective movies is always something of a black widow. So it comes as kind of a shock that she's the victim.
At that time, Faye's career wasn't at its height. She had made a lot of films that didn't come out quite the way she wanted. In this film, it was the best investment she ever made, because she was extraordinary, and I don't think anyone could have played it as well.
I knew her slightly, not too well prior to the movie. She, of course, had done Bonnie and Clyde with my friend Warren, also a member of this particular social circle. She's a wonderful actor, and I was delighted that she was going to be in the picture.
She was good for the part. She had a quality for a femme fatale. So I knew Faye, but I never worked with her. And sometimes it was very tough.
Faye took a long time between shots. Roman didn't think it was necessary. She did. That's, of course, her prerogative to reset her makeup. She wanted to be sure of how she looked because it was very specific. Roman, as any director would at times, would go mad with the waiting.
And then came the famous story of the hair, which became kind of symbolic of our relationship. What happened was that we were shooting a scene in Brown Derby, and she was, I think it was an over-shoulder shot with a backlight showing one hair sticking out. To a layman, it means nothing, but to us, it's something that would be visible on the camera in the close-up. It just didn't look good. So I cut and asked the hairdresser to get rid of it. So he came and brushed and put it back, and we roll again, and the hair sticks out again. So I cut again, and the hairdresser comes again, and we roll again, and the hair comes out again. And finally, I come up, I say, wait, Faye, and pluck the hair out. She went insane and started screaming and shouting and invectives and you name it. And I said, okay, well, that's a wrap. I don't remember how the whole thing was patched up. Of course, soon it was forgotten.
When there's grit and fighting on a set and arguing, and this is the way I want it and this is the way it's going to be, I love that. Do you know why? It's only through irreverence can you possibly touch a bit of magic. When you're too reverent to something, it invariably turn out underwhelming.
Looking back on those things, it just seemed like regular stuff, Faye, she could be a handful, no doubt about that, but so can he, so can I, so can we all.
And Roman got things out of Faye that we'd gotten out of it before or since.
Who cares whether there was a her or a fight with Faye? The result is important, and she did a fantastic work in this film. And I think that among other movies that Faye did, this is probably, if not the top, one of the best.
As Roman rightly said, I don't think anybody believes anything in a movie if it's information that's freely given. Particularly information like that, it has to be beaten out of somebody before you believe the validity of it. And so that was the basis for making that scene work.
And when we came to shoot it, Roman didn't feel that the first take or so, that I was getting enough zip into the slapping. And Faye agreed with him and said, just go ahead and slap me. Don't fake it, give me a slap, which isn't usually necessary. And I don't remember if I did actually slap her or not, but I know it gave me, I was less, tentative about the slapping in the scene.
Usually casting is terribly subjective. Everybody has their own opinion. But you got to John Huston, we all wanted John Huston, just like we all wanted Jack.
Physically, I thought he was great type for this role. So that's how I asked him, and he wanted to do it, so we were delighted. And on the set, we talked not so much about his films as about life in general.
Well, I worked with him as a director after this. He's pretty consistent, a no-nonsense kind of guy. I saw an interview where he said, I don't know what to say about the style of my work. I'd be very self-conscious about it if I thought I had something resembling a style. So he was pretty, he's like the final exponent of the studio system, actually, the most advanced one at the transition period around the time of the New Wave, or earlier with Orson Welles, who brought the director on screen.
I was surprised by the quality of the performance, because I have not seen the film for years, and then I ran it quite recently because I knew that you were going to ask me about it, and I didn't want to seem like a dumbbell. So I must admit I did have a look at it, and I was, not surprised, satisfied to rediscover that those people did a very good job. One thing is sure, that I did not feel like coming back to Los Angeles to work there, because I went through very difficult times just before that film. It must have been 4 years before. And that was the murder of Sharon Tate. So I really didn't want to work there anymore. I didn't want to come back. But I have friends there at the same time, namely Robert Evans, Jack Nicholson, and Bob Towne. And they all wanted to do this film with me. So that was my state of mind at the time I was coming back.
Robert Towne and I were roommates at some point, and he had this idea that we talked about, I don't know how long before he actually started writing it, to do a trilogy on Los Angeles. And the idea was to do a film, a trilogy, and wait the same number of years between them that passed in real time, that started in 1937 and end with the third film in 1953, the year that no-fault divorce went into effect in California.
There were a number of steps about that brought me to Chinatown. One was, oddly enough, was a construction project that was going on up at my then house in Benedict Canyon. A developer had managed to fog through City Hall an outrageous project, which was going to be moving 9 or 10 million yards of earth around and destroying the entire canyon. And I went down to City Hall and I saw how they worked, and the building superintendent actually said, this project is so ill-advised that I'm going to approve it because it will never get through. I mean, you know, the most tortured logic imaginable. And then I was walking with an old friend of mine along the beach, the Palisades above the beach, and I suddenly felt like I was about 8 or 9 years old because all the smells that I remembered as a kid, eucalyptus and pepper and the ocean. And then I realized that because of the growth of the city, all those scents that you could catch anywhere in the city had sort of been banished to the farthest edges where there were only a few traces left of them. And then there was an article called Raymond Chandler's L.A. And in it, there were photographs of Los Angeles taken at that time, which was 1970, but meant to suggest the period of Raymond Chandler, late 20s into the 30s. And I thought, my God, it would still be possible to recreate the Los Angeles of that period, and all these other things were roiling up at me. Then I went to Eugene, Oregon with Jack, and he was directing Drive, he said, and he wanted me for some perverse reason to be in the film playing a teacher, so I did. And I checked out of the library up there a book called Southern California Country, An Island on the Land. And in it, there was a chapter called Water, Water, Water. And it was a real eye-opener. It was about the way that the city of Los Angeles basically stole the water of the Owens Valley and brought it to the San Fernando Valley, and then incorporated the valley into the city. So I took that kind of nostalgia that I felt. It was more than nostalgia, the pain of feeling a loss of those things that I loved so much in childhood. And then the reason for that loss, which was the cancerous growth of this place at the expense of beautiful surrounding areas, and put them together, and that was the beginning of Chinatown. Then there was one final component to the initial phase of it, and that was Hyra, my dog. I had bought Hyra from a Hungarian vice cop who was breeding these dogs. And we got to talking. I said, well, what do you do, Tony? And he said, well, you know, I work in Chinatown. I said, doing what? He said, nothing. I said, wait a minute. You're working vice in Chinatown and you're doing nothing? He said, oh, yeah. I said, well, why is that? He said, that's what they tell us to do, is nothing. I said, why? He said, well, because the problem is that we can't get inside that culture. The dialects and the tongs we're just shut out. And so we really can't tell if something is going on, whether we're helping somebody commit a crime or preventing it. And that really stuck in my mind. I thought, what a great notion. And so I gave Giddis a background in Chinatown, where he did something and it didn't work out. Because then Chinatown as a notion begins to stand for the futility of good intentions. And then I thought, wouldn't it be great to do a detective movie, not about those things that had traditionally been done in films, but do it about something that's in front of your face every day, like water and power. And to make that a mystery, you know, make a mystery out of the fact that the reservoirs are being emptied. I thought, it's something you can follow through the city, just like you can follow this dried LA riverbed, and a man drowns in a riverbed. That's dry. How the hell did that happen? And I thought, wouldn't it be great to do a detective movie out of that? And so all these pieces came together, and I caught up with Jack and said, listen, I've got an idea. What if I do a detective movie?
It was a series of conversations. I must say, I don't remember them specifically, but he had this idea. All I pretty much said was fine. And Robert liked writing for me as he understood me as an actor in that period and thought this would be good.
I couldn't have conceived or written the character of Giddis without my knowledge of Jack and my friendship with him. We'd roomed together. We'd been in acting class together. I had seen him struggle in anonymity for 15 years, being insulted at the unemployment office by people telling him that maybe he should get a real job. All of those things that, in one way and another, became part of the character of Gittes, the thin-skinned quality, the cynicism, the flashes of anger, all of the things that made Jack unique as an actor and as a person were characteristics that inevitably found their way into the character of Gittes.
I got involved with Chinatown on a rainy night back in '71. I was having dinner with Bob Towne, who was at that moment a fledgling writer with a good reputation, but money meant nothing to him. He just wanted to write what he wanted to write. And I wanted him to write Gatsby for me. And I offered him at that time, which was an astronomical amount, $175,000 to do it. No, I don't want to try and beat Fitzgerald.
I didn't want to be the unknown Hollywood screenwriter who f***ed up a literary classic, because I figured that's what would happen, you know. I mean, you can afford to do that if you have some sort of reputation. But if you have less than none, and you do that, you know, I mean, and I just didn't want to do it. I didn't think it was going to make a good movie, and I wanted to do what I was doing.
It's just, I'm writing a story called Chinatown, but it's not about Chinatown. It's a place in your mind, rather. They began telling me about it. Just let's do that instead.
Robert Evans was not an independent producer. He was the head of the studio. He was the head of production and head of seduction. You know, Bob was good looking, had a beautiful house. He was the talk of the town in those days.
Robert Evans is a unique individual in every way, so, and somebody that we all got along with, and somebody who understood all of, you know, we were friends. I mean, Robert Towne had his wedding at Evans's house.
Chinatown was my first film as a bonus, because no person ever ran a studio and could make their own films. So instead of giving me a raise, Charlie Bluedorn, who was at that time owned Paramount, he let me have something unprecedented, which is being able to make a film a year and also run the studio. And it worked against me, not for me. If the picture were not a success, it wouldn't have mattered, but the picture being the hit that it was, all the other filmmakers around Paramount said, it's not right, he's working on Chinatown, why isn't he spending time with us in our film? So it reverberated negatively towards me.
I was living in Rome and working there, and I loved it there. And Jack called and said, I don't remember how specific he was about the kind of film, but that's something for us to do together.
We spent a lot of time together, Roman and I. You know, he's one of the great directors. So just based on that, not only the friendship, anybody would really have a strong desire to work with him. And Chinatown is a roman à clef thriller. Roman's very good and had an already well-established reputation for suspense pictures, even comedy, my favorite, cul-de-sac. So it was just a kind of natural progression.
I wanted a European's vision, not an American vision of it, because Europeans see America differently. And Jack wanted him very much, and I wanted him very much, and he wasn't that anxious at the moment to come back to America.
The subject was exciting. The genre was something that I thought of doing one day, but I wasn't very hot on going back to Hollywood and making a movie there again. But Bob Evans said, come over, we talk about it. I had criticism regarding the script. So I took a trip, and we had a meeting to talk about the script. And I remember Bob Towne at the time was somehow depressed by all criticism that we had, which mainly was the question of the length.
It was about 180 pages. And so I said, Roman, you know, let me take one more whack at it.
I said, okay. and see you then. And I left. And I thought that it was probably the end of my involvement.
I did a second draft, and I don't know. I think that Roman probably liked the first draft better than the second.
And then I somehow got more involved in it, and Bob Evans said, well, you must, guys, sit down now and really put it into the shootable shape.
Before we started work, he said, I have a present for you. And he gave me a book. It was How to Write a Screenplay. And he signed it to my dear partner with hope, Roman. I would go to his house every day with Hira, and we worked for 6 weeks there, and had dinner at night, and would fight during the day.
We were working in tremendous heat. There was a real heat wave in California then. But we'd sit down in a small room with Bob on the opposite side of the desk, with dog lying on my feet and Bob smoking his pipe nonstop. I was in a kind of daze throughout this work.
He did a one-line version of each scene. And he took us scissors and cut the pieces up, and we Scotch taped them onto the door of the room. And then we just moved these pieces around to see what pattern would emerge that would get us through the story with the most clarity and the most dramatic drive.
But we had two places where we were not together. One was the ending, and the other one was the scene when they have their love encounter. I was convinced that they should make love together, you know, that they should be bound by some kind of very intimate situation. And Bob didn't think so.
I don't remember that. I thought they should become involved. I remember plenty of other disagreements, but that I don't remember.
And also I thought that the girl should die at the end if you want the film to have an impact.
The ending I do remember. The original ending that I had written, Faye had killed her father because of the daughter, but couldn't talk about it. And Gittes knew about it and couldn't talk about it, so she was going to go to jail and possibly suffer the extreme consequences. It was not a happy ending, but it was a more complex ending. And I felt that the ending that Roman wanted was too nakedly melodramatic, and we couldn't get away with it.
And so we could not agree on this, and finally, since the time was running and we had to start and Bob Evans was pushing, I decided to go ahead, and I promised that I'll come up with these two scenes later. So we started shooting, and somewhere like 3/4 to the film, or even later, Bob Evans started getting very anxious about those missing scenes, because I must say I was postponing and a bit procrastinating, but finally I had to deal with it. And I wanted absolutely to have a scene in Chinatown, and I thought that the end would be good in Chinatown.
In the original script, there was none. There was no scene in Chinatown. I was worried about putting a scene there.
I thought that some action should take place in Chinatown to somehow justify the title. And we ended up by doing it, but at the very, very end. I asked Dick Silbert to just fix a street so it looks like a Chinatown street. So Dick did, but it was really getting critical by that time.
There were elements of the ending that was not completely written. There was about a half a page of dialogue. From the time that Perry Lopez says, "Loach, lock him to the wheel of the car," there's about a half a page there that wasn't written. The action was written. I mean, the killing, her death. It was a transitional piece in there that wasn't written.
So I wanted Jack Nicholson to really fashion it his way. And we were already on the location. He was in his trailer when I walked in his trailer and gave him this, and I said, "Jack, why don't you just deal with his lines?" And he did it in half an hour or something like that, and we shot it. Of course, the production knew already what the situation is going to be and what action is going to be. but I was not yet locked up with the dialogue, and that really happened in the last hours.
And Roman, he was right. I think he was right because a story with that degree of complexity needed the clarity and the simplicity of the ending that he saw. And I'm very glad that he was there and he prevailed because he was right.
No, that's how it is in life very often, that the culprit survives. And if you want to have a reaction of the viewer, if you want people to think about what they thought and think that justice should prevail, that you have to give them something they can think about. If everything is wrapped up in a happy ending occurs just because the merchandising people prefer it, the audience leaves and forget about the problem right over the dinner. Bob has a great ear for the dialogue. I mean, really every line is interesting and right. You know, it's not an invented sort of stuff that we hear in most of Hollywood pictures.
Forget it, Jake. It's Chinatown. Beautiful.